All right, everybody buckle up because this deep dive, well, this one's going to take us back to the birth of America.
It's a fascinating period, really. You see the seeds of so much that we consider, well, quintessentially American.
And the source material we're diving into today,
Yeah.
it's called pasted text, and let me tell you, it's packed with details that really paint a vivid picture of the drama, the uncertainty, the sheer audacity of it all.
It's one thing to read a dry account of dates and battles, but
Right.
to really grasp the challenges those early Americans faced, you got to dig deeper. You got to uncover the human stories, the clash of ideologies, the constant struggle to build a nation from, well, from scratch.
And that's exactly what we're going to do today, folks.
We're talking
The
revolution
nation building.
and a whole lot of bumps along the way.
So our story kicks off in 1763. The British are fresh off of victory in the French and Indian War, a war that, by the way, drained their coffers.
And who do you think they look to for a little financial top-up?
You guessed it, the American colonies. Enter the Stamp Act, followed by the Townshend Acts. Basically, a whole barrage of new taxes on everything from
Stamps, tea, legal documents.
everyday items to essential services.
And here's the thing. It wasn't just the taxes themselves. It was the principle. Colonists were being taxed without any representation in Parliament.
It'd be like...
It was
and-
a slap in the face to their rights as Englishmen.
Exactly. They felt like pawns in some elaborate game of empire.
And you can see how this ignited a firestorm of resentment.
And this resentment, this sense of injustice, it boiled over into events like the Boston Massacre in 1770.
British soldiers firing into a crowd of unarmed colonists.
And then, just a few years later, the Boston Tea Party.
Talk about a bold statement.
They chucked chests of tea into Boston Harbor. It was a direct challenge to British authority, and it showed the world that these colonists, they weren't backing down.
They were drawing a line in the sand.
And in 1775, that line, it became a battlefield.
Lexington and Concord.
The shots heard around the world.
The American Revolution had begun.
But here's where things get really interesting. They didn't just fight for independence. They declared it to the world in a document that still resonates today, the Declaration of Independence.
Talk about a mic drop moment in history.
Thomas Jefferson, the primary author, laid out a vision of a government based on the consent of the governed, where all men are created equal and endowed with certain unalienable rights.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
This wasn't just a breakup letter to King George. It was a radical, world-changing statement that inspired revolutions and movements for centuries to come.
But as we know, declaring independence and winning it are two very different things.
The war raged on for years, with the Continental Army facing some crushing defeats.
They were outmatched, outgunned, and often outnumbered.
But they had something the British didn't: an unshakable belief in their cause. And this belief, this unwavering spirit, it led to some improbable victories, like the Battle of Saratoga in 1777.
A turning point in the war.
It convinced France to throw their support behind the Americans.
Game changer.
And finally, in 1781, the British surrendered at Yorktown.
The war was over.
The Treaty of Paris in 1783 made it official. A new nation had been born. But as anyone who's ever moved out on their own knows...
The hard part was just beginning.
Right. They'd won their independence, but now they had to figure out how to govern themselves, how to create a nation out of 13 very different colonies.
13 colonies,
Right.
each with their own distinct identities, interests, and, let's face it, rivalries.
Yeah, talk about a recipe for chaos. Their first attempt at a government, the Articles of Confederation, well, it was more like a first draft than a finished product.
It was too weak.
It gave so much power to the individual states that the central government, it could barely function. They couldn't collect taxes.
Raise an army.
It was a mess. And amidst all this, you have these brilliant but very flawed men trying to forge a nation under immense pressure. They knew that if they didn't get it right, well, their grand experiment in self-government could crumble before their eyes.
And they were acutely aware of the eyes of the world watching them, waiting for them to fail.
So back to the drawing board they went. And in 1787, they gathered again, this time in Philadelphia, for what would become known as the Constitutional Convention.
A meeting shrouded in secrecy.
Imagine these guys crammed in a room, debating for months on end, trying to hammer out a system of government that would stand the test of time.
A system that would balance individual liberty with a need for a strong, unified nation.
And from that crucible of debate, from that clash of ideas and personalities, emerged the U.S. Constitution.
A document that's been called a miracle of compromise.
It established a system of checks and balances to prevent any one branch of government from becoming too powerful. It guaranteed basic rights and freedoms with the Bill of Rights. And it created a framework for a more perfect union. But even with this new constitution in place, the young nation was still on shaky ground. They faced internal divisions, external threats from powerful European nations, and the looming shadow of slavery, an issue that would continue to haunt them for decades to come.
Yeah.
And as if all that wasn't enough.
They found themselves at war with Great Britain again. 1812. Round 2. This time, it was about asserting their sovereignty on the high seas, about proving that the revolution wasn't a fluke.
It was about truly becoming a nation worthy of respect on the world stage.
The War of 1812 was a brutal conflict, marked by both victories and defeats. And while it didn't result in any major territorial changes, it did solidify America's independence.
It showed the world that this new nation, this experiment in self-government, it was here to stay. So from those early acts of rebellion against unfair taxes, to the crucible of revolution, to the messy and often contentious process of nation building, we see a nation grappling with its identity, fighting for its place in the world.
And that struggle, that constant push and pull between ideals and realities, between individual liberty and the common good, it continues to shape America today.
We've covered a lot of ground, but there's so much more to explore. If you want to delve deeper into this fascinating period, I highly recommend checking out Pasted Text. You'll find a treasure trove of information that will leave you with a deeper understanding of the challenges, the triumphs, and the enduring legacy of America's early years.
It's a reminder that the story of America, it's not a straight line to progress.
It's a story that's still being written.
And it's a story that belongs to all of us.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep the conversation going.